Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 7, or I guess Chapter 23 of this show, and this was just an absolutely amazing episode, one of my favorite episodes of the show so far, and it's another reason why I've been saying to be a little patient with this season, because of course things were going to culminate in a very satisfying and very epic conclusion. This is the beginning of the end of this season, and I could not be happier with the way this episode turned out. So of course we will be talking about spoilers for this episode, so if you have not seen Episode 7 of Season 3 of The Mandalorian, definitely go rush out, definitely go watch it on Disney Plus because you will not want this to be spoiled for you. So let's of course start off with my negatives for this episode, and of course, you know, Star Wars fans love talking about negatives for Star Wars because Star Wars fans really hate Star Wars apparently for whatever reason, but I guess my only negative is the fact that this episode is called The Spy. I don't really know who the spy is. Is it ELIA Kane? Because she's only in it at the very beginning, because she's really the only spy. She's only like double, triple, quadruple agent in this season so far. But I was really expecting one of the Mandalorian characters within either it was, you know, Din Djarin's group of Mandalorians or BO-KATAN's group of Mandalorians. One of them was possibly working for Moff Gideon or in some sort of way, but that never really happened. So I guess it's called the spy for some reason. But maybe it is like the armor. I'm seeing a lot of people on Twitter thinking that the armor is a spy. And if that is the case, maybe that'd be a reason. But again, that's still not explored in this episode. But maybe there is somebody. But let's actually get into the episode now. This episode starts off in a really interesting way with the Shadow Council, which is basically just a bunch of different Imperials from different sections of the galaxy that are all kind of hiding in the shadows, essentially, that are building up the Empire to essentially bring it to the First Order. And one little Easter egg that I noticed is this guy right here. If you watch it with the captions, his name is Brendol Hux, who is, I'm assuming is going to be the father of General Hux. I can only assume that is the role that he is essentially playing in this galaxy. Of course, General Hux being everybody's favorite character from the sequel trilogy, but I think that's a really cool detail because, of course, this show is not only kind of a sequel to the original trilogy in some sort of ways, it's also, you know, kind of a sequel to the Clone Wars show. This is Dave Filoni's baby in Clone Wars, kind of brought in to a new live-action world with The Mandalorian, but this is also turning into a prequel to the sequels, which is, I guess we're getting into a lot of different semantics with Star Wars and sequels and prequels and just all these different original stories that the show also likes to tell. Like this story that we're seeing here is very original for Star Wars, and I love all of that. So all the connective tissue between all these different movies and all these different, you know, elements of the timeline is always going to be really interesting to me. To see, you know, Brendol Hux in this episode, that's a really cool little note to show. And of course, you have Moff Gideon building his own little section of this Imperial force that he's guiding on his own, and he's kind of branching off, doing his own things, and even sabotaging the rest of the Imperials by doing what he did to Dr. Pershing in the third episode, because that is of course going to be against the actual plan that they're trying to do, because they want that cloning technology. You can tell that all these other people are so focused on bringing back Palpatine, but Moff Gideon wants it all to himself, so that's essentially why he had ELIA Kane do what she did in that third episode, which I also think is another interesting element, because of course with Star Wars Celebration just ending, we heard the news about Dave Filoni's Star Wars movie that he's going to do that's essentially going to be the finale of the Mandoverse, as they have put it. And of course they had some General Thrawn, you know, references in this episode as well, which he's also missing from this Shadow organization. We don't really know what he is up to at this very moment. Of course, we're going to see what he's doing in the Ahsoka show, which I'm very, very excited for that. But Moff Gideon and this entire Imperial force is kind of disconnected. And of course, Moff Gideon is going to be wanting to do his own thing because he wants to take Mandalore. As we see, he's actually been hiding out on Mandalore for who knows how long at this point. And so I can only imagine that this Dave Filoni Star Wars movie is either going to be a build-up to see exactly how the Mandalorians take out Moff Gideon on Mandalore, and it's all going to be a build-up to this epic war, or that's going to be the series finale of The Mandalorian, and it's actually going to be a build-up for Grand Admiral Thrawn for that Star Wars movie. And I can only imagine that these two separate forces that are all kind of separate from this Shadow organization, they're kind of going to be, at least the Shadow organization is going to be trying to bring back Palpatine and doing their own way of building the First Order, but I think these other two forces are going to be the threats for that Star Wars movie that has to be taken out in some way before the events of Force Awakens, because of course none of these characters are in Force Awakens. So I imagine that that's going to be the direction that they go with this new Dave Filoni Star Wars movie, and I cannot wait for either one of those two options, whether it's Moff Gideon or whether it's Grand Admiral Thrawn or whether it's kind of both of them. Maybe they both team up and they all kind of cross over in that sort of way. So I'm very excited to see what it could possibly mean for this Star Wars movie. But in terms of this episode alone, seeing the threats and the force that Moff Gideon has amassed on Mandalore is absolutely terrifying. As soon as they got into those caverns and they were kind of going in and you got to see this like Imperial design for the hallways that they're running through, I was like, oh god, this is a trap, because the entire episode I was waiting for like when the armorer flew off in her ship to go meet up with the rest of the fleet above the planet. Since there is no communication between the two, I thought maybe that Moff Gideon was going to be above ground and already taken out this fleet above ground, and I was really worried about that. But once she got up there and you didn't see the threats up there, I was like, wait, when is Moff Gideon going to come into play in this episode? And of course, they were actually on Mandalore, which was entirely unexpected. So to see the force that he has amassed essentially here, and the fact that they have used the Beskar alloy essentially to create these new Dark Troopers, these new Stormtroopers that are flying now, of course, because of Star Wars, they can fly now. But that's also an explanation to what Captain Carson saw on the ship that Moff Gideon escaped from, because of course, he has kind of amassed this army on Mandalore, and that's who's been residing down here the whole time. There's also been a new group of Mandalorians that have been residing on Mandalore this entire time that survived the purge. They've been kind of, traveling across the planets, hiding from all these different monsters, all the different elements that are attacking them. When it comes to the structure of this season, which I think is going to be the biggest talking point of this season so far, I do understand some of the complaints about this season kind of feeling a little bit uneven in terms of when it decides to focus on the main storyline, when it decides to kind of shoot off and do some little offshoot side stories, especially when it comes to episode 3 and the last episode. But in defense of episode 3, I think I really enjoyed the fact that we got to spend so much time with ELIA Kane, understanding her motives and understanding what she's doing to Dr. Pershing, and kind of diving fully into those storylines and that dialogue and those characters, whereas I wish they did that more with the actual Mandalorian group, because of course Paz Vizsla plays a giant role in this episode, which I'll get to him in a second here. But that episode where his son was taken by that giant bird and the Mandalorians go off and he gains the trust of both Din Djarin and BO-KATAN, that entire episode, I wish there was more time dedicated to getting to know these characters and getting more dialogue scenes between them all, instead of like a moment where Din Djarin saves his son, and so he kind of nods at him and says, we are friends now, and that's the reason why he decides to, join forces with them to go help the people on Navarro, and all these different things that happen throughout this entire season. I wish more time was dedicated to those characters as it was with episode 3 and ELIA Kane and Dr. Pershing. I wish that was more the case with the entire season, even in episodes like the last episode where you have a whole excursion with Lizzo and Jack Black, which I don't really understand why Lizzo and Jack Black are getting a lot of hate for the last episode, because I think they fit the tone of that episode really well, and they're all goofy and fun in it, and there's room for goofy fun things in Star Wars like that. But I also wish at the same time we got more character elements between Din Djarin and Bo-Katan in that last episode as well. So really episode 3 should have been like the template for the season in terms of this writing, the dedication to those characters, because those are very insignificant characters, at least you thought when you're watching that episode, and they spent so much time developing them. I just wish they kind of spread the love to some other characters, especially Paz Vizsla, because he was incredible in this episode, because of course he's been kind of there from the very beginning of the show, and I'm very curious to kind of rewatch the entire season, or the entire 3 seasons so far up to this point, where Paz Vizsla gives his heroic sacrifice at the end of this episode, which was absolutely devastating, because this is of course a character that is a descendant from a character from Clone Wars that was also voiced by Jon Favreau. So this is kind of Jon Favreau's baby, and he was killed in the end of this episode in just an epic way, where he takes out all these other different, Beskar alloy stormtrooper guys that are flying around, and it is incredibly epic. He saves Bo-Katan and the rest of the Mandalorians that are trapped in that room, and it is so satisfying to see him just go all Rambo and just destroy all these different people, to absolutely go nuts like we've wanted him to do this entire time. And we just apparently got a glimpse of it in the pirate episode, because this is him going all out, and it was awesome to see that. But as soon as those Praetorian guards walked up, when he's already, kind of injured and exhausted, his gun was heating up and about to explode. There's so many great moments within this fight scene that was telling a great story with this character and with this epic fight. And as soon as those guards showed up, you're just like, it's going to be the end of this guy. And it was very, very effective. And I think it could have been even more effective if we had a little more time dedicated to that character, like we were dedicated to Pershing and to ELIA Kane. Another really surprising thing in this episode was the return of the storyline set up in episode 1 of this season with IG-11 or 88. I always mix it up when I try to do these videos. I feel like I have it and I forget as soon as I hit the record button. But when it comes to the IG droid that was destroyed in season 1, and they were of course looking for that part to fix it all up, and you're wondering, is that storyline ever going to come back? Well, it does come back in this episode in the best possible way that they possibly could have brought back this character, because of course they're not going to bring back IG-11 or IG-88. His sacrifice was very important in that first season, so instead the Anzellans decided to hollow out its center chest console and have a little dock where somebody can sit inside of it and can control it from the inside. And of course, who are going to put inside of this robot? Who's small enough to fit inside of it other than Grogu himself? And you get a lot of great, funny, just goofy moments. Again, there's room for goofy, funny moments in Star Wars just like this one. I think the comedy of this scene where Grogu is just hitting the yes or no button and you get to hear the voice of the IG droid come out of it is so incredibly funny. Every single time I saw Grogu in this thing, you just know that's going to be an action figure that everybody's going to have, because of course it's going to blow up and be extremely popular, because of course Star Wars is for kids and it's going to sell toys like crazy. And this is just an incredibly genius way that they can bring this character back in a very fun way. And every time he said yes or no, even in a moment where Vizsla and WOVES are fighting in the middle of this episode and Grogu just steps in and says no, it is so incredible that this character can now say yes or no through this voice of a robot. And it's just, how great is that?
Yes. Yes, what? Yes. 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 Yes.
And of course, the star of this season being BO-KATAN, you of course get a lot more info on her character and essentially what happened on the purge of Mandalore, because of course she was sort of in charge of Mandalore at that point when of course the purge happened and the Imperials were destroying this planet. And there was a point where BO-KATAN made a deal with Moff Gideon that if she surrenders to them, if she gives him the Darksaber, she's pleading to them to let the rest of the cities that are undestroyed at this point in time go, let these people survive, let these people live in order for her to surrender. And she does surrender, and Moff Gideon promises that, but of course Moff Gideon betrayed her in this moment. I wish we got to see this instead of just hearing the dialogue of BO-KATAN speaking in this moment. But of course Katee Sackhoff is incredible in this role, and she does a great job conveying this emotion, this guilt essentially that she had, that she feels responsible for all the death and the destruction of Mandalore. And you really get to feel the weight on her shoulders throughout this entire thing. And I love her arc in this entire season. Of course, her having the Darksaber now, her facing off with Moff Gideon once again through that glass at the end of the episode. I cannot wait to see them actually go head to head and fight in the finale, because of course that is probably going to be set up to happen. And it's built up in such a fun and interesting way with these characters that were very unexpectedly given a lot of attention in this season. And one character that was not given a lot of attention this season, unfortunately, is Din Djarin. He does take kind of a step back in this season, and I think that is at fault of the Book of Boba Fett show with what they did with Mandalorian's character, in that with him reuniting with Grogu, of course. I think that storyline could have been throughout this season. It could have been an idea where you have Bo-Katan and you have Din Djarin both having a reason to be the leader of the Mandalorians. Of course, Din Djarin has the Darksaber. Bo-Katan has the history and the family line that has ruled Mandalore before, and so they have different reasons to be the leaders of Mandalore. And maybe Din Djarin can realize that this is actually not for him, and that he really just cares about his son. He cares about Grogu over everything else, and he can decide that, yes, I don't need this to be satisfied with my life, I just need my son. And then he goes off and meets Luke, and everything happens in the exact same way, but maybe that happened in episode 6 of this season instead of what we got in episode 6. And I think that could have fleshed out Din Djarin's character and at least given him something to do this season. But of course, he is still fun to see, throughout this show. I love his character. I love Pedro Pascal as the voice, and of course the two actors that play him inside of the suit. And so it's always great to see him on screen. Of course, he's captured and taken to the debriefing room at the end of the episode, so we're going to see what happens between him and Moff Gideon in the finale. So hopefully Din Djarin gets a little bit more to do in the finale, and maybe another moments where we get to see Grogu save Din Djarin this time around, instead of kind of what happened at the end of season 2 where Din Djarin saves Grogu at the end of that season. So I am so pumped for this season finale. You have no idea how excited I am, especially with how great this episode was. And I think this season is culminating in a very interesting way that feels a little more reminiscent of season 1 than season 2 in terms of its structure, in terms of how it has been paced out, and how there's been a couple episodes that have felt like a little bit of departures. But by the end of it, the way it culminates into a final, season 3 encapsulation of what this story was, with the return of Mandalore and the Mandalorians fighting to get their home back and reuniting this entire divided force, and this message where you can have these two different divided sides, but they can work together for one common cause. And I think that's an important message to tell, especially at this moment in time. And I think this season is coming together in a very, very good way. So that is going to be my review for Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 7. Definitely comment down below all your thoughts on this episode, because it was one hell of an episode, which I'm sure everybody has a lot of thoughts on it. And also leave predictions for the finale of what you think is going to happen in the last episode of this season. And of course, what you think is going to lead up to the Mandalorian movie, or the Mandoverse movie directed by Dave Filoni, which I'm still very, very pumped for that as well. So of course, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one, like all the other Mandalorian reviews that I've done all season long, and of course the finale that's going to be uploaded next week, and of course all the different movies that I've been reviewing this year, with Mario being the last review that I just did. I actually played Mario while reviewing the Mario movie. It was a lot of fun to make, so definitely go check out that video as well. So thanks everybody for watching this video. Subscribe, leave a like, comment down below, and I hope to see you all in my next one.